part of the way that I work through all this as a writer and maybe as a historian is that I want to capture. I want to capture stories. I want to capture memories and have something to kind of hang on to and tell you a couple of stories as well along the way. So what I have for you guys this afternoon, it's a remembrance. It's titled Carburetors, Catfish, and Curmudgeons, a remembrance. When I was 5 or 6 years old, my parents were headed to a funeral. They dropped Andy and I off at Grandma and Grandpa Shively's for a couple hours. They're trying to explain a funeral to me and that somebody had died. I knew that my dad had worked in an automotive shop and he fixed things, so I asked if Dad needed to go and start them up again. Introduction to funerals. Thank you everybody for coming today. I think it means a lot to our family. In my remarks, I want to try and capture some of my memories about Dad. I also want to try and bridge the Larry Sweet that many of you knew from decades ago with the Larry of the last 10 or 20 years who far fewer people knew. In Dad's last wishes, they're over here if you want to read the whole thing, he wrote, "To me, the whole visitation, funeral, dig a hole in the ground is a crock of," it's a family event, "someone making a lot of money. And maybe my wish that I be cremated as cheaply as possible, and at some time maybe my ashes will find their way to a riverbank or a lake somewhere. If on the slim chance there may be some money somehow, I would like there to be a big party for all, a big party, what we're here for today." So that's what we're here for. Remember Dad, make good on his wish for a big party. You note that his last wishes also mention returning to a river or lake. Our family has a lifelong connection with rivers and lakes that we can trace back to Dad. Dad grew up in the river behind us, not too far from here. Fishing, boating, and swimming were in his blood. Some of you know, when I was born, Mom and Dad were living with a friend on the Illinois River. The only problem was I was born in March. For those that are locals, what does the Illinois River do in March after all the snow melts? Floods. In 1979, there were record floods. To make it back to the house where my parents were living, I had to be transported home in a boat. I've been near or in or on water ever since. Before all the Asian carp, which have recently been renamed to Kobe, invaded the river, we used to put our boat in just down from here at Spindler Marina. We would ski and tube up and down the river for hours. We skied up as far as Lakin and down to the much less scenic Peoria riverfront and the section of river that's right behind us. We took the same trip yesterday. We returned some of Dad's remains to the river. Our family also took short weekend family getaways that involved camping and fishing. One of our frequent destinations was the Woodford. This is my dad and Lorian doing some cement work. One of our frequent destinations was Woodford State Fish and Wildlife Area in the Illinois River, a few miles upriver from here. Locals and river rats will know it as Woodford County Ditch. We dig for clams in the mud and catch flathead catfish. For many years, we spent every spring break camping and fishing in land between the lakes, Kentucky. Some of you here today joined us on those trips. Dad and I recently restored an old boat, and I convinced him a year ago to revisit land between the lakes on spring break with our kids. It was a great sort of full circle trip. The fishing, however, was nothing like I remember it, and like the pictures show that it used to be. As his help failed in recent years, taking him out fishing or boating was one of the few things that could actually get him out of the house. So the book A River Runs Through It is one of my all-time favorites. If you haven't read it, you should, or there's a surprisingly good movie adaptation featuring a much younger Brad Pitt and Tom Skerritt. The book's a story about fishing and rivers, but it's mostly about family. At the end of the book, the narrator, one of the fishermen in the stories, has grown old. I think you'll see why it's worth sharing today. So this is a quote from the book. "Of course, now I'm much too old to be much of a fisherman. And now, of course, I usually fish the big waters alone, although some friends think I shouldn't. Like many fly fishermen in western Montana, where the summer days are almost Arctic in length, I often do not start fishing until the cool of the evening. Then in the Arctic half-life of the canyon, all existence fades to a being with my soul, and memories of the sound of the big Blackfoot River and a 4-count rhythm in the hope that a fish will rise. Eventually, all things merge into one, and the river runs through it. The river was cut by the world's great floods and runs over rocks in the basement of time. Some of the rocks are timeless raindrops. Under the rocks are the words. Some of the words are theirs. I am haunted by waters. It's worth a read or a watch if you haven't gotten to it. So a deep connection to water is not the only legacy that Dad left us. Our extended family on both sides takes pride in self-reliance, being able to figure out how to do things for ourselves. My dad exemplified this life philosophy. From a surprisingly early age, he exhibited a rare ability to understand, repair mechanical and electrical systems. He had a particular genius for fabricating solutions to complicated problems. There's a great article here from when Dad was just out of high school working at Caterpillar behind me that you should read. Dad built much of our first house with help from family, and he kept all of our family cars going for years longer than they should have. Dad was a great and patient teacher of these skills to Andy and I, and really to anybody that wanted to learn from him. We got an early start in this education. Dad worked for many years as an HVAC service and installation tech. When I was quite young, I would guess 8 or 9, Dad started to bring home old air conditioners just for Andy and I to take apart. Parents of young kids, note that taking shit apart is actually a great strategy for teaching kids the use of tools and basic mechanics. Andy and I happily disassembled a number of these until one time he forgot to drain the Freon from the lines. I cut into a copper line, got blasted, contributed substantially to the hole in the ozone layer, and I think Mom might have put a stop to the air conditioner disassembly parties after that one. Later, Dad bought an old HVAC service van. He repainted it and converted it into a camper van for our family adventures. I remember also converting an old lawnmower into a quasi-go-kart because we couldn't afford the real thing. Another time, Dad helped me fix up an old Honda 125 Trials motorcycle that came from Uncle Steve Alec. And later, we fixed up a 250 Yamaha that I pulled it off a scrap pile that somebody was going to recycle. Early on, Dad taught us how to properly clean and adjust a carburetor, a huge and valuable life skill that I've used many times since. When I turned 16, my parents bought me a Pontiac Firebird for my first car. In true Dad fashion, it came from a Peoria junkyard with a salvage title. I learned a lot getting that car running and keeping it that way. So this is a note to my kids. There's no way whatsoever that you will ever be getting a Firebird for your first car. In this respect, I'm not and will never be as cool as Grandpa. Another story that really captures my relationship with Dad happened when I was in college and visiting home for break. We had an old GMC Sierra flatbed pickup. It was formerly a Silco work truck. I think it was a 77. It was kind of a beast of an old 4x4 with a straight 6 4-speed manual transmission. Dad had it at the garage for an oil change. We were standing around shooting the shit as one does in garages and started talking about what we would need to do if we wanted to fix all the body dents and rust. After discussing it for a while, one of us said, well, probably the first thing that you'd want to do is to pull the seat out. The next thing that somebody said was, what size do you reckon those bolts are? That's probably 5/8. From there, it was just a couple of weeks before we had a restored truck. Another story, I'm going to jump ahead a couple of years here. Kara and I had been dating, we weren't engaged yet. Kara lived with my parents for a while, and she worked with my Uncle Dale at Tremont. Dad was tricky to get to know, to say the least. Most of the time, he didn't talk that much. Kara had an old Cavalier that she had driven since high school. It had blown a head gasket, which can be an expensive repair for somebody just out of college. Dad went out, got the parts, fixed the head, sent her on her way. You can tell somebody that you love them, you're proud of them, or you can just fix their head gasket when they need help. One of the things that I learned from Dad was patience. If you're going to teach someone, particularly a kid or a teenager, auto body work, engine repair, life lessons, you're going to need patience in the extreme. When he was teaching something, Dad had almost endless patience with us. Note the stress on almost. I can only remember the one time they really lost patience with me. I was working at the Decatur Public Library and driving back and forth from Bloomington. The starter on my GMC Jimmy went out at a gas station, so Mom and Dad had to get a trailer, probably borrowed from one of you guys, and came and picked me up. I had to be back the next day, so Dad started replacing the starter for me. As some of you probably know, starters on a lot of vehicles that are kind of hidden. There's a real knuckle buster to get at this one. The next day, I think it was a weekend, I was back to help him out to finish putting the starter in. He was almost done. There was one terminal left, and he told me, you get under there, tighten this thing, it's isolated, be careful with it, don't put too much torque on it, it'll break. I get underneath the car, tighten it up, so what happens next? I break the terminal, which means taking the whole thing out, starting over again. At that point, he did chuck a wrench across the driveway, had a few choice words to say. It only took a couple minutes for him to calm down, and then he finished telling me about how to replace the starter all over again. So it was in 2015, Dad had kidney cancer, had a kidney removed, and we moved him in with us after that. In true Dad fashion, after he left the hospital, he never went in for any follow-up appointments or rehab, just had a kidney taken out and got on with life. I knew we needed to get him moving and doing something after this. We enrolled him in a project to restore our basement. This involved digging a window well by hand. The next thing we had to do was cut a hole in our cement foundation. We got to rent some fun tools to do that one. After that, we busted out the concrete floor, took it out through the window. I had to do a lot of this, but the work got him moving again, and I think it helped him to feel good about contributing to something. A few more stories to wrap this thing up, although maybe we're only in the middle. His deep patience certainly extended to his grandkids. So when my daughter, Lorian, was young, I think this is probably around 4 or 5, she'd go down to Grandpa's room and she'd watch the old school Burl Ives, Frosty the Snowman, and Rudolph videos while sitting on Grandpa's lap. They watched these over and over again, sometimes more than once in a day. And this wasn't just Christmas time. They just watched these things over and over again. He would sit with her and watch these Christmas videos. Dad also helped us by picking up the kids from school every day. Sometimes he took them to school. So one week, this hasn't been that long ago, during COVID, I think, I was working from home and I was supposed to pick up the kids. Twice in 1 week, I forgot to go get the kids, and I had to be reminded, or got a call from the school or whatever. Twice in 1 week. Dad did this for years. I don't think he ever forgot that. Maybe late a couple of times, but just another little story about Dad. He started something with the kids too, where that if they were well behaved during the week, or partially well behaved, somewhat well behaved, just a little bit maybe, that they could go and get a snack and a drink at the store every Friday afternoon. It's kind of a legacy of Dad that we have continued. So my all-time favorite project with Dad was building an elaborate treehouse for our kids. One day I went down to his room with a simple sketch. I had a 10 by 10 two-story treehouse planned out in my head. We took that basic plan and we ran with it. It's one of the best things that we had done together. After it was done, we kept adding on to the original structure. We've got a book sitting over here with some of the pictures of the treehouse that you should take a look at. A few other things that Dad worked with just while he was living with us in the last 7 years. He helped us do the furnace and the central air in our house. We replaced all the water lines together, most of the electrical. We did a bathroom renovation, a kitchen renovation, a garage renovation. Karen and I came to him with this idea for the ice rink that we have in our yard, and the accessories, some of the ice rink accessories that he built are over here. He helped him with the restoration of that high wheel bicycle over there was one thing that we did together. We built 4 little free libraries that are around Lexington, Illinois now. Countless vehicle repairs and appliance repairs. We built a wheelchair lift for my father-in-law and a bunch of other projects. In the last year or two, Dad helped Jonah repair a riding lawnmower and Lorian a snowblower. They learned to repair these and then were able to sell them, so he's passing on some of those skills that he passed on to us. As a number of chronic illnesses started to pile up on Dad, he became less mobile. He spent many hours every week standing by his truck in our driveway. Since we're in a small town, he waved to everyone that passed. Many people in Lexington only knew him as the friendly face who waved to them on South Street as they went past. At one point, Kara looked up our house on Google Maps and Street View. Sure enough, Dad's standing by his truck with the hood up, tinkering on something. I think it's so perfectly fitting. I love these pictures. We've got copies here with us. They'll come up in the slideshow. Or grab your phones, look up 208 South Vine in Lexington. He's there in Street View. So let me be clear also. Dad made multiple poor lifestyle choices that led to him passing much earlier than he needed to. I don't believe I ever saw him exercise for the sake of exercising in his whole life. His diet was awful. He drank like a fish. He did, however, have an absurd work ethic that he passed on to Andy and I. He got in massive amounts of exercise through hard work at home and through his various jobs. So by sheer force of will and hard work, he gave us a better life and better places to live than our working class family salaries should have allowed. Again, I think it's true of many of my extended family members are here today. It's something I admire. I believe there's something to be said for working hard at home to give your family a better life. I want to take a moment to address my kids and my niece and my nephew directly. So not to speak ill of the dead, but my grandpa, Sweet, he was a rough character in some ways. Dad was aware of this. He wanted to do better. I believe he succeeded. He was also a work in progress. He was reclusive, poor communicator much of the time. I've told you about many of his good traits, but his shortcomings were apparent to those of us that were closest to him. So I've worked diligently to retain the good parts while improving in the areas that he struggled. If part of the work in our lifetimes is to try to become as good or better than those who went before us, then you guys have got your work cut out for you. Though me as the older brother, I'm damn near perfection as you're going to find on this good earth. But if you look at my brother, I'm sure you can find some things to improve upon. When I was sitting with my dad,
Dragging on.
we're getting there. There's only a few pages left, I swear. When I was sitting with Dad in the hospital, randomly scrolling across social media feeds to distract myself, I came across a poem from the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh, he passed away in January of this year, so not that long ago. I've always admired his writing. So this came up while I was sitting in the hospital next to Dad. It was too difficult to read at the time. I knew I needed to come back to it, and I needed to look at the words and the sentiment. Dad was certainly no Buddhist. They don't drink alcohol for starters. That's him doing masonry work with Lauren that keeps coming up with the sound. So Dad wasn't a Buddhist, but the poem shares many similarities to Dad's last wishes and his belief. So hopefully a month and a half later, I can get through this piece with you guys here today. It's called Oneness. The moment I die, I'll try to come back to you as quickly as possible. I promise it won't take long. Isn't it true? I'm already with you in every moment. I come back to you in every moment. Just look, feel my presence. If you want to cry, please cry. Know that I will cry with you. The tears you shed will heal us both. Your tears are mine. The earth I tread this morning transcends history. Spring and winter are both present in the moment. The young leaf and the dead leaf are really one. My feet touch deathlessness, and my feet are yours. Walk with me now. Let us enter the dimension of oneness and see the cherry tree blossom in winter. Why should we talk about death? I don't need to die to be back with you. So Dad asked specifically for a big party. For those of us that knew him well, this is supreme irony. It took tons of convincing to let us throw him a 50th birthday party. Many times in recent years, we had parties or small gatherings at our house and invited him to join every one. Rarely did we get him to come out. In many ways, he was a classic curmudgeon. Fortunately for us, he was one of those lovable curmudgeons. So at his party today, I ask that you read his last wishes. Take some time to look at the photos and documents. Thanks to Grandma Sweet's hoarding, there are even a couple of grade school report cards over here somewhere. Beyond that, I ask perhaps you tell us your stories and memories of Dad. Perhaps take a minute to ask our kids about their memories of their grandpa. Perhaps remember Dad the next time you're by a lake or a river. Thank you everybody for coming.